Yeah, well, I think, man, there's so much to be said on it, right? It's a deeply personal thing. As much as it's gone, public and become a really popular thing to share about and experience kind of together, which I think is important to some degree, it's still a very deeply personal thing, right? People are coming forward and sharing how they once believed certain things, they were once raised in maybe a Christian environment, and now they've gone through a period of their life or a season of their life in which they've kind of just start to slowly tear down these convictions they've once held about God, Jesus, the church, the Bible, and so I think in one way I can resonate with it because I've probably been, I'm 35 years old, but I've definitely walked through seasons where I've had to tear down things that I once held to be true, but thankfully have kind of found my way out into not something that's necessarily new, but it's my old faith, but just with a new perspective on it, I guess, And so I think what's happening today, as I see it, not just as a regular person, but even as a pastor, is that people are walking through this kind of phase of deconstruction, hoping to find something new. And I just don't know if anything's out there, I think the hope is that you would find your old faith, but with a new perspective. You would find Jesus, but with a deepening, I guess, like a new level to life, And that would be my hope, I think, as I kind of experience it and see it happening to so many people. Because it is a very personal thing, right? And by that I mean, especially if you're watching this, there's real wounds that people have experienced, right? Like people are deconstructing because people have hurt them. Church cultures have hurt them, right? People who say they believe these certain things about Jesus or the Bible have hurt these other individuals, And so we have to be honest that oftentimes there's a wound there, right? And it makes deconstruction, I think, important because here's the reality. I'll make it personal too for myself, right? Before we just start to go off on a tangent. But I was handed the Christian faith and the gospel by people, right? In a church community. I didn't have to work for it. I didn't have to go searching far and away for it. I was handed the gospel and these important truths by a community of people, which I'm very grateful for, right? We might call that the construction part, right? Construction is when your faith starts, the origin, right? The origin story of your faith in Jesus when you first meet him and everything's fresh and you believe the gospel and you love every worship song at every service, right? Man, you're on cloud nine, right? You're handed it by a community. What you start to realize over time is that community is an imperfect community of people. No matter how genuine they are, no matter how kind they are, no matter how persistent they are offering you Jesus, they're still an imperfect group of people. I'm an imperfect pastor at an imperfect church, right? And as we hand the gospel to people, often we hand them the gospel with cultural layers to it, with our own baggage to it. And so there is an important part of deconstruction where you have to, with wisdom and time, pull apart the unhealthy aspects of what you received when you received the gospel, right? It's a lot like this. My mom has been a nurse for 45 years. It's incredible, right? For a period of time, she worked at a hospital where her goal as a medical professional was to get people out of hospitals, which is weird to think about because people go to the hospital to get well. But oftentimes there's this particular medical term they have, I can't think of it right now, but it describes how people get more sick in the hospital when they're trying to get healthy. And it's because the hospital itself has its own diseases in it, right? And so my mom for a time worked as a medical professional whose goal was to get people healthy, but healthy in a way that they can get out of the hospital before they caught something else. It's the same thing with church. We get the gospel, but at the same time, you get it in an environment where you can also catch other things, right? And so oftentimes, deconstruction is important because you have to pull apart these layers that are unhealthy, these things that aren't necessarily what it actually means to follow Jesus, And the goal, though, is to see deconstruction, I think, not as an end in itself, but as a means to a greater end. And that's where you actually grow deeper, right? And so I would say from a personal level, even beyond just a pastor, just thinking, man, deconstruction can in a lot of ways be an invitation from the Holy Spirit to grow deeper in prayer and to grow deeper in community. And I think what we see, like even on TikTok, for example, 21 million views on just the hashtag of deconstruction. That's crazy, right? That means people are out there looking for a community to help them explain what's happening to them. And so the church should see that and be like, wow, we should be that community that is still with them, right? And so we should make space at our table, we should make space in our churches and our pews for people to walk through doubt. Because doubt and asking questions and challenging things that you first believed is not a sign that you don't believe, it's a sign that you do believe. It is a sign that you have faith and you're trying to process, you know? And so we have to create space for people who are working through this. It's no accident that millions of people are jumping on the deconstruction train and trying to figure out what they once believed in, you know? Because I think it's an invitation from the Holy Spirit to grow deeper in community, not to run away from it. I think it's a chance to grow deeper in prayer and not to run away from it, you know? And so as people are processing like, man, God, like what's going on? The world feels so much bigger than it once was when I first believed all these things. And that's true, it has. But at the same time that the world has gotten bigger, your view of God needs to get bigger too, you know? And so that's why I would encourage people to sit. When you don't know what to pray, you don't know what to think, you don't know what to read, just sit in silence. Just be before God and realize that God requires nothing of you in that moment, and you don't need to require anything of God but just presence, you know? And that's what I mean by like a deepening prayer life, because that's what I experienced personally coming out of a time of where I had to kind of tear down some things that I once thought were true about Christianity, were true about what it meant to follow Jesus, that I realized was just extra baggage. It was the unhealthy parts that I had picked up in the hospital, right? And so silence and solitude helped to create space for that to happen, you know? And to find relationships where it was safe enough to ask questions, it was safe enough to doubt, you know. It's amazing that one of Jesus' own disciples was doubting Thomas. Like he had his own moments of like, did this really happen?